Well, guess what? I just completed reading a book. Let me just say this, that I get many, I was about to say hundreds of books. I wouldn't be lying. But I get many books per month, right, from authors who are want to be part of the Running African Book Club, are interested in what we're doing here, and of the opinion that their books could add something to this space. But just generally, authors saying, read this and tell me what you think, and if you will, put it in your book club or not, but just read it and tell me what you think. So over the years, I've had, I read 2, 3, 4 books per week. I'm not lying, serious books too, I'm telling you, serious books, sometimes academic text, sometimes, children's books, sometimes just autobiographical or biographical or so on, or, so on and so forth. And so I just, one of the books I got, and I've said to you over time that one of the things that we do here is that we tend to read the books in the order that they come. Sometimes we allow books to jump the line because of what they are speaking to and my own personal interest. One of the books that I allowed to jump the line is a book called Forged by Time, How I Survived 45 Years in Prison by Ras Michael Gillie Priest Heron. And so I read the book. It took me a day and a half, or probably less, to read the book by Ras Michael Gillie Priest. I'll just read the blurb for you. Unjustly imprisoned since 1979, Michael Gillie Priest Heron has put to paper what prison is like for someone who was wrongfully convicted in a nation that prides itself on justice, freedom, and equality. A gripping memoir of his childhood and years spent in New York State prisons, Forged by Time is a first-hand account of police corruption and assaults at the hands of prison guards who literally packed their KKK regalia along with their lunch. Along the way, Gillie comes to discover that it was little more than sharing the name Gilligan with another Jamaican back when Gilligan's Island was a popular TV show that has kept him locked away all these years. Told in an easy conversational style, Forged by Time is a historical manifesto of both a post-independence Jamaica, as a country and people established their identities, and a story of Gillie's survival against long odds. Well, Gillie Priest is in the studio with me, and we're going to hear from him in a minute, but let me tell you a little bit about him. So, of course, Ras Michael Heron Gillie Priest is an author. He earned a bachelor's degree in behavioral sciences, graduated magna cum laude, and went on to complete a master's degree in professional studies. After migrating in 1979, Gillie Priest Michael Heron was incarcerated for what he consistently maintained were politically motivated allegations. He would go on to spend 45 years behind bars, during which time he consistently fought to prove his innocence. And you need to read the book to understand exactly what that entailed. I read the book, and I'm telling you, one of the things that happened to me while I was reading the book, I forgot everything and everybody around me. I sat down and I read that book, and I know that my husband was talking to me one at a time, and I know my daughter said something to me, but it's when I done read the book and feel like I come out of the movie, because it read like a movie, and look around me and realize that I was still in my living room, and it's a book that I read. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's a really good read too, by the way. This storytelling is great. So Gillie Priest Michael Heron's time in prison was not only marked by personal achievement, but also by his commitment to helping others navigate their own struggles. And we'll talk about that this morning. Despite unimaginable hardship of incarceration, Michael turned adversity into opportunity. Following his return to Jamaica in May 2024, Michael Gillie has dedicated himself to understanding the conditions of prisoners and deportees in the country. And this is how we met, right? Gillie, this is how we met. Recognizing the stigma and marginalization faced by returnees, he founded Forged by Time Limited, a social enterprise committed to providing guidance, support, and access to essential services for those reintegrated into society. Through this work, Michael Heron continues to be a voice for justice, reform, and human dignity, both in Jamaica and beyond. He joins me in studio. Welcome, Gillie Priest.
Thank you very much. Good morning to you and your listeners.
Thank you so much for coming in, all the way from Kingston.
I appreciate it.
Yes. I know you want to sit back, so that's fine. So pull the microphone closer to you. Well, let me just turn it off and we'll get it closer to you. Once again, the book is called Forged by Time, How I Survived 45 Years in Prison. 45 years. That's a long time, my brother.
That's basically my entire life. You know, because I went in the system at 19 years old and came out at 64 years old. So that encompassed my entire life experience. And sometimes I was asked, what do I think of that experience? And I said, well, it's not an experience I would ever change. Not for the fact that it's outside of possibility of changing it, but it's the only experience I have, so I learned to embrace it. And that's what it was.
I read the book. I told you I was reading it line upon line, precept upon precept. I wasn't lying. I read it just like that.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And made all my little jottings along the way. I had to read it almost 2 times, right? The first time was reading it seriously. The second time was just going over to ensure that I hadn't missed anything, because it reads like a movie. So I wasn't surprised when somewhere in the book you mentioned Colin, the brother. I think his name is Colin.
Yeah, Colin.
Who you met while in prison, who had a similar situation to you in that he was incarcerated unjustly.
Yeah.
And later on went on to make, a movie was made about his life.
Yes, Crown Heights.
Crown Heights.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen that movie, so I went and I watched it yesterday.
Yeah.
Because that also helped me to understand a little bit more of your own situation.
Appreciate that, yeah.
So you, and I like the way the book is set out, by the way, because you do Jamaica, you write a little bit about Jamaica, and then you go to, Sing Sing. You start with Sing Sing, and then, then you take us through your life.
Yes, I do.
Just back and forth. Why was it important to use that style of writing?
Well, in the opening chapter began in Sing Sing, and I chose that because from a style of writing, they say you'd have to write something, or you should write something where you grip the reader the instant they open the book.
It did.
And then once you're able to do that, then you can backpedal to where you actually want to start.
Yes.
So it's a matter of using the first 10 pages or so to hold on to the reader.
Yes.
And then hopefully they will want to.
It did. And then it became almost an adventure in a way through your life. Because this is how you continue throughout the book, which is to talk about being in the different prison systems in the United States, or the different, what do you call them, systems? The institutions. The different institutions.
Yeah.
And then in between that, just to string along that stream of consciousness, it really is brilliant if you ask me.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Gillie Priest.
Okay.
You were born here in Jamaica, of course, and you spent a lot of time overseas. A big part of that, 45 years of that, in prison. Yeah. Your early life in Jamaica, you write about here. You're from a middle class family.
Yeah, basically a middle class family. Both parents were professional. My mother was a postmaster general for the eastern section of Jamaica. My father did architectural engineering. He spent many years working at KIW, Kingston Industrial Garage, among other places. So I was basically raised with those, at that time, whatever the moral and the values was at that time, you know. And during the years of my incarceration, I used to go back and reflect at the way I was brought up and see where I could pull my strength from. Because one of the parts of being incarcerated so long, you have to calculate each and every moment of your step in order to survive. You can't just do it haphazardly. You can't just do it randomly. So I was able to regurgitate my past to find my strength.
Very early in your life, you saw, I was introduced to, and it seems also from reading the book that it was almost organic in a way, the way you came to Rastafari.
Yes.
That as a youth, here on the island, in the 70s.
Yeah.
You became aware of Rastafari, and you talk in the book about the first time that you saw that, but then how that gradually became part of your own ideology and who you became.
Yeah, so true.
Let me take a break because I want to come back to talk about your early school days on the island. Our special guest in studio, author and Rastafari elder. He's in the house with me this morning. Ras Michael Gillie Priest Heron. The book is Forged by Time, How I Survived 45 Years in Prison. So we're looking at your early days in Jamaica, of course, and through the high school system. One of the challenges you faced going through the system obviously was because by this time you were espousing Rastafari.
Yes, I was, yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, basically, my first memories of dealing with Rastafari was when I was about 5 years old. I was residing with my aunt at 2 Love Lane in Kingston. And one evening I was sent out to make a purchase, and came upon a street meeting. Back in those days, Rastafari used to actually keep street meetings in the middle of the street at night. And that was my first encounter. But it was not an encounter that I was conscious of. It was more on the subconscious level, where later I was able to reflect upon it. And then subsequently I came in contact with a Rastafari elder by the name of Ras Historian. And Ras Historian was the president of the Rastafari Movement Association that was based at 53 Law Street. And there was also where I met Puma Jones. Puma Jones was a singer that eventually joined up with the Black Uru group. Yes. She was an African-American that immigrated to Jamaica. And she was the one that got me into like social consciousness, civic duty. Used to take me around with her to solicit goods from manufacturers and give it out, you know. So then from there on, I took, because of my traveling back and forth, I wasn't able to sit the common entrance. For some reason, I kept missing it. So the last chance I got in Jamaica was
the Grade 9 Achievement.
The Grade 9 Achievement.
Yes, you're right about that. Right. I recognized it immediately because I remember that. You know, that there was it's a second chance.
Yeah, like the last gate. Yeah, the last gate. You missed that, and then you had to go into some type of vocational.
Yes.
Then when I got that, I was I signed it up for George's, Woolmer's, and I think a third school. I don't remember if it was Casey.
Casey, you mentioned.
Right,
in the book,
Casey. Yes. And what happened was I was not admitted. Even though I passed the test, those schools refused to admit me because of my Rastafarian, dear word, paraphernalias.
Yes.
And my discipline.
And the paraphernalia you said in the book was like the Rasta,
the
Rasta belt.
The belt and the socks and all them little things, the buttons and all that, because I was into all that really at that young age.
Yeah.
So my mother had to come down and she had a conversation with the principal at Mount Bay High School because she had gotten to know him while she was a postmaster at Mount Bay Post Office, and I got into that school. But basically,
so your mother was in the U.S. and she heard that she was in the U.S. at that time?
At that time she had immigrated, and then I had to contact her and let her know that even though I passed the Grade 9 Achievement test, all the schools were rejecting me based upon my Rastafari consciousness. So she returned to Jamaica and visited the principal at Mount Bay High School, and due to their conversation, well, he kind of said basically he would admit me as long as I dropped all that Rastafarian stuff in his words. And That was how I got into Marby High School.
But you didn't drop the Rastafari.
No, I did not.
But you wrote about how you learned early to be present, but not visible.
Yes, and
because you literally were hiding from the principal.
Yeah, and that was what that experience played a large part in my incarcerated period, where I was able to get things done in a facility known by certain people, but still not there.
Yes,
and that was how I was getting around the principal at Marby High School.
But your school days here on the island, even though you got into Morant it still seemed as if it was a bit rocky for you. Expelled twice.
Yeah, I did. It was.
Yes. So on the first time you were expelled, what was the reason again?
One time the first time I expelled was I refused to close my eyes during devotion.
Right. Yeah.
What happened was I knocked with some of my friends and we tell them, this closing of the eyes and praying to a white God, I'm not with it. I can't really keep faking it. So we came to agreement, about 4 or 5 of us, at the prior devotion. Mm-hmm. At that time in school, every form had a prior devotion morning. And we decided not to close our eyes. And the principal, a principal by the name of Mr. Perkins, while he was praying, he looked up and saw that my eyes were open, and my friends closed their eyes, so he summoned me to the principal office, and that led to my
expulsion. So you were expelled then, and then you... what I like about your resilience, and you write about that in the book, is that you went to you sought a way to get back in school, including going to the Ministry of Education.
Yes, I went to the Ministry.
But at the end of the day, it took you going to Morant Bay, sitting in the corridor, day in, day out, until the principal said, "Boy, you're not going to your class."
Right, that was I learned a lot from that simple thing, because when I went with a childish mentality, when I went to the Ministry of Education, I went there on a more bombastic level, believing that the minister was going to side with me, and then I would go back to the principal and basically throw it in his face. And then when the person that I saw sitting here today, I don't believe I actually spoke to the Ministry of Education, but at that time that was my belief.
Yeah.
And it was such a letdown when this ministry representative told me that the ministry does not run the schools in Jamaica. Right. It is the principal.
It's interesting, because this issue has not, in terms of Rastafari children in school, that is still an ongoing problem. And you're talking about 1970...
75, 74, 73, 74, 75, yeah.
Right. And you were expelled another time. And this time when you were expelled... You didn't go back to school.
No, I was actually banned from going into the parish, because what happened was I borrowed a kid's bicycle without his permission, and I went down into the town to get a pair of soccer boots. And the principal saw me when I left the campus, and he knew that I was not one of those guys who rode a bike to school. So he went and asked the owner if he had given me permission, and the owner told him no, he did not give me, which is correct. He did not give me permission. I just rode it, because that was like a practice. It's not like you stealing it. But anyway, the principal went to the police station, reported that I stole a bicycle, and he went to the kid family. And eventually, when the police officers came, they told me not to return to school and not to return to the parish.
Mm-hmm. And so this ultimately led to you going to the United States.
To complete high school.
To complete high school. One of the things you write about throughout the book is, and I find riveting, the political situation in Jamaica that you engaged with and that you witnessed as a youth, but also that socioeconomic political situation also in New York, and how Caribbean people were living, Jamaican people and Caribbean people generally in the Bronx and so on. A really great insight into what that whole time was. So was it, you said for you it was a culture clash?
Yes, it was. It was starting with the school. Mm-hmm. Because we went to a school where in those days where you had the majority of the teachers were white. And the teachers, from my personal opinion and experience, they didn't actually care about the education of the students coming here. So they would basically come in the classroom and ask you, what is it you want to do today? And the average person is going to say, okay, well, they want to watch television in the classroom. And I was structured in such a way in the schools in Jamaica, going through a structured system, that I could not deal with this laissez-faire approach in the U.S. So I stumbled there, and then I had to come back to Jamaica.
Yeah. You talk also about the gangs. You witnessed how gangs were in the school, baby gangs to the bigger gangs and so on, and how the school was almost like a part of that system.
Right. It was not actually a learning institution for me personally. It was gang infested, and the teachers wasn't there actually from my perspective to teach and for students to learn. So it was more like you would refer to it like they were babysitting us. Just like you would have a babysitter at home that tried to comfort the child. That was what schooling was. And then I literally realized that I was falling back.
Right, so you were back and forth between between New York, the Bronx, and Jamaica, yes, because after you came back, and you were literally selling on the street corner.
Yes, I was selling right at the corner, South Parade and King Street. And while selling there, it keeps bothering me. I kept getting this feeling like I was being stuck. Like I was not moving, I was not progressing as an individual. And it got so much in my consciousness that I'd say, you know what, I have to leave. I have to return to the U.S. to find some way to progress, some way to... I needed a feeling of growth. Yeah. And even today in my life, if I go 3-4 days without doing something, I start to get that stagnant feeling where I have to do something. So that was what was happening there.
Right. That was obvious to the book, because you kept going back to the fact that you needed to finish your high school education. So that back and forth. But you did go back to the U.S.
Yes, I did.
At some point, finished... Well, you didn't finish high school at that point either.
At that point,
but talk to us about how you, because as a young boy, in the system in the Bronx in New York, it sounded to me as if you were introduced to a kind of a global, a melting pot kind of a situation that included criminality, drugs. Even while family was at the core. Right. You talk about your relationship with your mom and how other families, lived. What was that like for you, that experience? Because obviously this is not a Jamaican kind of thing. Right. Even though Jamaica, you talk about how the violence was just about to happen in Jamaica. Right.
Well, one of the contexts I would like to point out, in those days in Jamaica, most of us were young teenagers. Our parents worked. And there was not a strong, outside of the home, there was no cultural engagement, except that my mom used to take me to the Jamaica Progressive League. For those who are not familiar with the Jamaica Progressive League, the Jamaica Progressive League was basically the founders of the People's National Party in Jamaica in the 1930s. A lot of people is not aware of that association. So a lot of Jamaicans would take their kids to the Jamaica Progressive League, where they would teach them how to cook Jamaican style, play Jamaican. Anyway, what is important to me about that context is that they used to have in the U.S. what they call reefer houses. And reefer houses were apartments that basically Jamaicans started opening up to sell marijuana. What I found fascinating with those reefer houses was there was where we used to go for cultural engagement, reasoning with each other, listening to music, and for those who had immigrated at a very young age, they learned about Jamaica, because the school didn't teach us about Jamaica.
So these were really important social spaces for Jamaicans.
Very much. But in this space now, you find criminality acts, selling of marijuana. You may come in encounter with weapons. You may hear people glorifying engagement in criminal activity. But people were there for different reasons. Everyone was not there for the same reason. Sometime now you will go there for one reason and then you get contaminated by the next, which is also that was part of that cultural experience.
Yeah. One of the things you talk about is how easy it was to be in a group of people, and somebody would probably steal a car, and that seemed to be what was the reaction? I'm not quite sure I got it from the book. Like, this was like a simple crime then? Yeah. That the police didn't necessarily spend a lot of time on.
What it basically was for me, at that young age, I did not understand what criminality was. So, saying that, what I'm trying to say is that you would be around criminality and not knowing that you could be charged based on association. Right. So as a young child, I would say, okay, my friend stole a car. I would drive in the car. I would go in the car with them and drive around and have fun, knowing that I was not involved.
I got clearly, yes, your naivety.
That naivety.
In those spaces,
not knowing that when the police pulls you over, you're going to be charged as an accomplice.
Right.
And that was when I first got that encounter with the law in terms of joyriding. We used to call it joyride.
Yeah.
Because I growing up in Jamaica, even a simple thing as coming from school and going on someone's property and picking up a mango, I never used to engage in anything like that.
Right.
But coming home, I wait for my friends, they would go and do it, I stand in this. And that was how I took approach to crimes when I went to the US, that if I wasn't physically engaged in the commission of a crime, then I would be absolved. Somehow I expect the system
you had a kind of a belief in the system.
Yeah.
That the justice system would take care of that which wasn't true.
Right, which wasn't true.
I'm going to take a quick break, but when I come back, we want to talk about Gilligan. Is that the hat? No?
No, this is...
Oh, I need to go look that up, because I kept saying, which hat is that? That looks like...
It's a hat that has a rim that goes around. It's like made out of canvas. Sometimes you see those military guys wear it. But it has the complete rim.
Yes, because I don't know the show you talk about, which is Gilligan's Island.
Yeah,
yes, okay. I don't know that show. But anyway, let me take a quick break. Heron Gillie Priest is my very special guest in the studio. Forged by Time: How I Survived 45 Years in Prison is his book. We don't have a whole lot of time, so we're going to jump over some and give you a chance to get a copy of the book and to read the book. But Gillie Priest, suffice to say that somewhere along the line, you started wearing a specific kind of hat, and that hat related to or looked like a hat from a television show, and you got the name of the person who wore the hat in that show. Talk to us about that hat.
Yeah, well, what happened, I came to Jamaica, and I don't remember how I came in possession of a hat. Well, it was a hat that was worn by a character from the Gilligan's Island program. That was a regular TV sitcom that they used to have in the U.S. I don't remember if I ever seen that sitcom in Jamaica, but it was a regular daily program. And so one day when I returned to the Bronx, I entered the park, and when I'm emerging, them see me at that time. Basically, I said, "Here comes Gilligan," and everyone laughed, and that was how that name got stuck on you. Yeah.
Let me just remind you quickly that this hour is brought to you courtesy of the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. The hour between 7 and 8 o'clock brought to you courtesy of the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, 7:38. And then it came a time, Gillie, that a crime was committed, and this was murder.
Yes, it was.
How did that hat?
Well, what happened was after the crime, the police had gathered information, and from the information they gathered, they started to search for two individuals. One of the individual name was allegedly Michael Dunbar, a.k.a. Gilligan. Now, this was at the time when I had already now started to use the name. My friends started to call me Gilligan. And so when I got arrested, the police was in search of Gilligan, who they alleged had committed the crime. And let me kind of get into just a little context of the crime. The allegation basically from the Bronx County District Attorney Office was that two individuals, Michael Dunbar, a.k.a. Gilligan, and Aston Thompson, he was known in Jamaica as Bucky Marshall. These are the two people they said they were in search of. So they went to one of the crime scene and investigated, spoke to 4 alleged witnesses. And one of the alleged witnesses made a statement and said, that sounds like Gilligan and his boys. This is a person who did not actually witness the crime. So then, when I had gotten arrested as a kid driving in the stolen car, joyriding, they had a picture of me at the precinct. So they took that picture to the person who first mentioned the name Gilligan, and that person said, no, this is not the Gilligan she was referring to. But at that point, the police had already come to some type of determination that they arrested me with that name, so I was going to be prosecuted and charged for it. And the basic allegation was that these two individuals, Michael Dunbar, a.k.a. Gilligan, and Aston Thompson, Bucky Marshall, who got killed March 26, 1980 in New York himself, so he wasn't arrested or charged. And that these two individuals were selling marijuana, using the proceeding from the marijuana and purchasing weapons, that these weapons were being sent to Jamaica to fight the upcoming 1980 general election. I believe it was one of the most bloody political years in the history of this country. And that the person who was supposed to be transporting these weapons back and forth at one point misappropriated a set of the weapons, and therefore those two people were ordered to be killed. And I was charged in the murder of those two persons. And the other person they were looking for was Aston Thompson, Bucky Marshall, but he had died before, never got arrested. And I went to trial by myself, but in the argument in co-conspiracy with Aston Thompson.
Yeah. You talk about how you were literally tortured and beaten by the police when you were arrested.
Yeah.
That whole process of interrogation, that you thought you would die.
Yes, I really believe
How old
that.
were you?
I was 19 years old when I got arrested.
Take a minute to talk about that. Sorry to bring you back to that, but
yeah, when I got arrested, I like to share one experience before that. One time while when I was attending Mornby High School, they had taken us on a trip outside to go to the courthouse, the Mornby courthouse, to visually see how the court conducts itself. And I remember at that young age, maybe 14, 15, 16, whatever year it was, I had this impression when I went to the court that the judge was all-knowing, that just by the fact that he was a judge, he would be able to cipher out falsehood from truth. And I relate that experience because when I got arrested and was eventually taken to see through the system, I was expecting that I had this false notion that here you have a judge, the judge will know the facts. Somehow that was just my perception. But anyway, when I got arrested, I was held at the precinct for 3 days.
which precinct was that?
It was at either the 47 or the 48 precinct in the Bronx. And I was being interrogated. And for those 3 days, I was handcuffed to the chair, beaten. And they asked me about the crime. And I kept insisting that I am not Michael Dunbar Gilligan. And they keep insisting that I was. And then after some point, they started to switch the argument and say, well, they wanted the weapon. And I kept insisting that I'm not Michael Dunbar, I do not have any weapon. But at some point during the interrogation, I started to feel like I was going to lose my life. And I had to escape from these guys. So at one point, I told the officer, okay, I have the weapon. And he said, you have the weapon? I said, yes, I have the weapon. They said, where's the weapon? I said, I have it in a building that located at 167 on Grant Avenue. And the reason why I chose that address, it was an abandoned building. So my intention, I was going to take them inside the building, like up on the 3rd floor, and I was going to jump through the window and escape from them. But unfortunately for me, when we went to the abandoned building, one of the officers, he held on to my pants waist, so I couldn't get away. So what they did was they forced me up on the roof. The building was like a 6-story roof. And they tell me to go down the edge and then try to convince me to jump. So what I did was I went to the edge of the building, and it was early in the morning, maybe 5, 6, while people was going to work. And then I just started to shout out, just started to scream out to draw the people's attention so they would look up and see that something wrong was going on the roof.
You said you were screaming murder.
Yeah, screaming. And then when the crowd started to, passerby started to look up and saw me on the roof, I was screaming murder. The officers went down on his knee and came out and tell me to get off the roof, get off the roof. And then I kind of have them going around in a circle in the street, just making up stories, just trying to figure out not to get.
And I got from that the pain that you were close to death.
Yeah.
And so you had them just driving around saying, oh, the gun is there, the gun is there, the gun is there. But that was an escape route for you.
Yeah, trying not to get back at the precinct.
Yeah. But it seemed to me, even then you thought that there was no way you're going to be convicted. First of all, you're not Michael Dunbar, you're Michael Heron, and there's no way, I mean, even though you've gone through all of this, you would have been convicted. But I don't know if you used betrayal, but you were betrayed many times.
Yes, it was. And what happened was, it was a betrayal that's based upon my own lack of knowledge. Lacking certain consciousness, how the system worked. Not at that time fully developed, knowing that there was a systemic racism.
Yes.
That was just being started to come into my consciousness. And the sad part of that experience also is how quick at times, and this is one of the hurtful and most painful part for me, how quick at times the Jamaican government assists foreign governments in setting up their own citizens, whether they do it consciously or unconsciously or subconsciously.
How did they do it in your case?
In my situation is this. When I eventually contacted the Jamaican consulate in New York and tried to explain to them the identity process, they kept telling me that they cannot intervene in the judicial process of the United States or in a foreign country.
In other words, you were arrested as Michael Dunbar. So you're reaching out to the consulate to say, I am Michael Heron, right, but they have me here as Michael Dunbar.
As Michael Dunbar, and see what type of evidence I could generate from the Jamaican documentary system to do that. And for some reason, no assistance. And what got to me is this: whenever, and based upon experience, whenever the United States system contacts the Jamaican government for any information to assist in convicting a Jamaican citizen, they can intervene in the system then. But when the citizen contact them and ask them for assistance in proving innocence or whatever issues they develop, they will interject that they cannot intervene. They
cannot assist. Hang on for me. She's 7. Gillie Priest, you see, we have only 14 minutes.
Yes.
And we don't start talking about the prison system yet, and also the work that you're doing. It means that it's a part 1, 2, 3 interview. Yeah. But, all right. Sorry, the hour is brought to you courtesy of the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs between 7 and 8 o'clock. To kind of make it concise, you went through all of that system, and through the process and through the courts, but you had people testifying also against you.
Yeah.
Because, as you talk about, there's a whole other industry of racism that have people by the balls and the short and curlies, literally, to testify against you.
Yeah.
You ended up in prison.
Yes, I did.
That first time on the bus, you thought you still would be able to show that you were innocent.
At that point, yes, because at that point they always try to tell you, okay, then you're going to get. You see, in the United States, and it may be the same thing in Jamaica. Whenever you get convicted by a jury, you are not fully accepted as convicted until you get your first right to appeal. So your sentence does not become final until you go through an appellate process. So after I was found guilty, I pinned my hope on the appeal process.
And you got how many years?
How
many years you got at the found guilty with the sentencing?
The sentence was 45 years.
45
I was sentenced to 45 years to life. I was sentenced to 2 life sentences. 45 years to 2 life sentences.
That must have shocked you to the core.
I could not even calculate that type of time.
How old were you then? 19?
I was 19 years old, and at that time, I knew no one. I met no one in the system at that time with that length of sentence.
And by this time, you had 2 children?
At that time, 2 children, a son and a daughter.
So, what was it like? You've done such an excellent job, right, in the book, in terms of writing about what the prison situation was like. Racism in prison and all of that. So I'm really going to recommend the book to our listeners, because there's more to it. In telling your own story, what you have done is to tell the story of a system that is inherently racist. It continues to be to this day. So what you went to which prison first?
First, I went to Elmira Correctional Facility. That's a facility where basically they send young juveniles that admitted into the system. So I was specifically designated to that prison by the sentencing court because of my age.
Yeah.
And then once you go through reception there, then you're dispersed to based upon a classification system. So because of my sentence and the crime, I was designated top security, and I was shipped to a maximum security facility. So, and
what you've done in the book is that the chapters where the different prisons that you've been through, you spent some time talking about them. For example, and this was, you're talking about 1980.
1980.
So Elmira, then you moved to, and like we say, it's a back and forth, Attica.
Yes, I did.
These are things we just see in the movies. Then Clinton, you seem to have spent quite a long time at Clinton.
I did a total of 18 years at Clinton in 3 different occasions.
Right. And Greenhaven.
Yes.
Also upstate. Upstate CF is Correctional Facility,
yeah.
Clinton Correctional Facility. And how you pronounce this one?
Shawanga. Yeah.
And then Coxsackie.
Kawasaki.
And also Adirondack. Adirondack and
Fishkill. That was the last facility I was in before Fishkill. I came.
So you've been through all of this. One of the things you talk about in the book is that because you were innocent and because you were very sure that you had to get this appeal. Yeah. That one of the things you did was to always check for the law library.
Yeah.
And it is through that process that you ended up even in the education system in terms of getting your own degrees. Talk to us about that.
Yes, I did. Well, I was first introduced to the law library system in the prison by another prisoner, Jamaican guy by the name of Desmond Andrew. And I vividly remember him saying to me, have you been to the law library? This is when I was first in the maximum facility, let's say for 2-3 months. And I said, no, I didn't know there was a law library here. And he said, come, let me show you where the law library is at. Because I kept telling anyone that I got the opportunity, I'm innocent. I just kept repeating that over and over. And he introduced me to the law library. And then eventually, over the years, I spent most of my time working in the law library, studying the law, trying to understand it, seeking communication assistance from the Jamaican government. And eventually, I became proficient enough to assist myself and assist others. And then I realized at some point, and this is a key point I'd like to touch upon, I realized after years of fighting and not being successful is that I was becoming stagnant in terms of my own personal development. I needed to grow as an individual whilst trying to get my freedom. Because one of the things you find within these facilities, when you concentrate on one aspect, you neglect the other. So even if you come out of the system and you prove you're innocent, no, you're returned to society as an imbalanced individual. I didn't want to experience that. So that's when I started eventually enroll in the college system and pursue those degrees.
So you got your first degree, you went on to do a master's.
Yes, I went on.
And these were with honors, really?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
You said that the law library, the Rastafari temple, and the school building for you were things that anchored you.
Yeah.
You know, did we ever correspond while you were in prison?
I don't recall, but I think I may have, because the reason why I say I may have is this: what happened when I was in Fishkill, I used to listen to your program on they had a Bandulu station coming out of Fishkill, New York, and there was someone who was broadcasting it on a computer. And but the reception was so bad it would go in and out. And that was when I first came across, get knowledge of your existence. And I'm almost certain that I had reached out, but I'm not quite certain because there were a few people I reached out about. Because
just going through the book, I said, there's so many points, material manifestation points, when we must have corresponded. Yeah. One was Abuna Fox and what happened. Was it not that whole process of setting up the Rastafari temple and the conflicts, all those issues? I mean, I really covered that. Yeah. And I was speaking to prisoners, to people who were incarcerated during that period. And so I recall that clearly. But you were so integral to trying to get Rastafari recognized as a way of, and a form of worship within the prison, which you did.
Yes, what happened was I went to a prison by the name of Clinton Correctional Facility, and there I encountered a brethren. Today he runs a blog program out of England. They call him Badass, the runaway slave. That was the acronym that he uses, and he was...
What's his name otherwise?
Well...
It's not
Jaboni.
Is that Jaboni?
Jaboni. Well, he was the one that spearheaded the Rastafari struggle in the prison. He was the spearhead of it. And what happened was when I encountered him, when I encountered him, he started to explain. I said, we have to fight this.
Yes.
And he was the one that took the initiative. Yes. And then we kind of galvanized the support around him.
Yes.
And because we were not allowed to congregate service, we were not allowed to assemble more than 2-3 people. So we eventually took it to the court, followed all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And even today, those are rights that are benefit not only by people in the prison system, but right across the entire United States. That's the main case Benjamin versus Coughlin. That is the name of the case. If you Google it, you will see that case comes up.
Yes.
And this is what gives right for people in corporate America, lawyers, attorney, teachers, to wear dreadlocks, go to their profession. So that was something great that came out of the correctional facility.
Right.
And we have to one more time say, big up to Jaboni. He's the one that we rallied around to spearhead that issue. Yes,
big up Jaboni. And you're right about the issues around that. And then when you moved later on to what was the other? Was it Green Haven?
Yeah, it was also Green Haven.
That the Rastafari temple was actually there. But you talk also about the visit of Abuna Fox and how that went down and so on. I'm talking about it because people who've been listening to this program for a long time will recall that I covered that clearly and was well, you really shed a lot of light on it in this book. So at some stage you were writing to just about everybody in Jamaica in terms of
everybody. At one point, my case was picked up by the public defender office down here. His last name was Witter. I don't remember what his first name was.
Yes. Yeah, we know Mr. Witter.
Mr. Witter,
yes.
Right. And then the Jamaican, on 2 or 3 occasions, the Jamaican government gave me a lawyer. They got involved. I communicated with even former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson.
Right.
But for some reason, the assistance was not in a fulsome manner, so it kept ebbing and flowing. To the point, and then it kind of just petered out.
And you talk about that K.D. Knight was also had the responsibility to do some investigations, and then later on you said it was published in the
and
papers.
Even at some point they had sent up to the consulate the identity of Michael Dunbar Gilligan. And then at one point they had informed the court that they were willing to assist in proving my identity. But what happened is whenever the government in Jamaica changed, it's like I went back to ground zero.
So the title of the book is How I Spent 45 Years in Prison, and you got 45 years to life. It means you spent with all the work, you spent 45 years. And I noticed on page 155, and I marked the page, you talked a little bit about that survival. I do have the book here. I don't know if you have it, but let me see if I go to 145. I have lines everywhere where you said I attended college 4 nights a week for almost 3 years while still working in the law library. I graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Behavioral Science, magna cum laude, on June 17, 2017. And then you talk about those people who attended and those who didn't attend, but that you sat there alone. While you were in prison, you talk about your father passing, your mother passing, all these things and how they affected you. You yourself being ill, getting ill in prison, having a heart attack.
Yes, I had it quite twice.
Twice a heart attack. Yeah. How did you survive?
I tell you what, I always go back. My grandmother, her name was Agatha Smart. And she came from the maroon town of Moortown in Portland. And ever since a young child, I always, for some reason, I control this belief system that is the person that I draw my strength from this lady Agatha Smart. Not someone I ever met. I never met her. And for some unexplained reason, her existence and the simple knowledge that I have of her, it feeds me. And I always also go back to the fact of how I was raised. Because what happened was, when I was young, my parents used to recognize a certain determination about me, and they used to give me a lot of responsibility. That's one thing I always credit my parents for. They gave me a lot of responsibility from a young age. So I had learned to rely upon myself, to make decisions for myself. In some situation, they may have given me too much responsibility at a too young age. But overall, and stuff like that is what I draw strength from, including my culture. And I believe that was one of the most fundamental. When you go into the system with a strong cultural belief and a strong culture that's embedded in your consciousness, it helps you to survive.
There's so many persons you met in prison, including Colin Warner. We talk about the movie Crown Heights, that he came to you and you advised him. And then later on, when he was freed, he came back to you to say, I'm back now. And he helped you quite along the way. But you said that case, it finally What happened when during that process?
Well, what happened was he went and found some of the witnesses, because a total of 4 witnesses had testified against me in both cases. And all witnesses recanted, meaning that they all at some point informed the court that the trial testimony was fabricated. But because for the court to acknowledge that these statements were fabricated, they would have to acknowledge that the fabrication was induced by the prosecutor. So not wanting to implicate the prosecutor, they all denied the...
And we have to underscore that, and that is well said in the book in terms of those persons who later on came with affidavits to say, I was induced, I was pressured. I mean, the one person was pressured that will take your children from you. Another person already had a court case, and so that how the police really coerce people.
And that's a standard process.
Into testifying against you. The book ends at 2023. You left
2024.
2024. And I'm going to invite you back.
Thank you very much.
You have to come back for part 2. Because we want to talk about that process, but also to talk about the work that you're doing now. And I give you a minute to talk about the work you're doing now as a result of being in that system for so long, in reintegration and looking at deportees and so on. We take a minute to do that.
Okay. Well, what happened now that I'm deported and I'm in Jamaica, I've made a promise to the Virgins in the system that once I return to Jamaica, I'll try to set up some type of organizational structure to assist with their eventual return to Jamaica. So I incorporated Forged by Time Limited as a corporation, and I deliberately choose a for-profit corporation to try to build an income-based employment structure, not just a non-profit system. And that is what I'm presently engaged in. I'm also organizing a deportee conference. Sometimes I use the term involuntary return rate, but I rather use the term deportee. I know a lot of people kind of shy away from that term, but on a personal level, I do not. And we are planning a conference for August the 17th at the Simon Boulevard building located at 10-12 North Parade in Kingston, and we are looking forward to really galvanizing information and support for the returning resident, because one of the things I find, a lot of the brethren and sisters who get deported, they are in the shadows. I know of one individual who is married to a woman, and he cannot even tell the woman that he's a deported, even while he's taking care of the family. So trying to set up a structure, and I was also reached out to by brethren in the prison system in Jamaica seeking assistance. So I've liaison with someone that works at the Legal Aid Society. I'm trying to do volunteer service there to assist the brethren in the prison down here while trying to set up a structure to accommodate those that will be eventually. And I met with a lady by the name of Golata. I don't remember her first name. She said to say hello to you all.
Carla Gulata.
So I'm doing it on here that I did relay the message to you. She said hello. So so I look forward to the next opportunity to come back and expound on that aspect of it.
We'll do part 2 in very short order.
All right.
I know next week is Father's Day, so it will be the week after that.
Okay.
We'll definitely do part 2. We invite you back, and then we'll give you some more time to go through the process and to talk about the work that's coming off the back of all of this.
Okay.
45 years in prison for a crime he did not commit, and humble and still holding calm. And
and thanks for this opportunity. Let me say shout out again to the virgins, them badass, and I have a team that assists me, including Mr. Andel here.
Yes, Mr. Andel.
I have virgins in Abdul in France. I have 2 other Virgin Rasta and Robert Barnes in Miami. So we meet on we call it like a Zoom program. And we try to brainstorm. And big up to the Virgin who gave me a lot of support, the most support since I returned to Jamaica. Jaboni Badass, thank you very much.
All right, give thanks, Jaboni. All right, so...
And thanks to you too and your staff and to everyone that's affiliated with this program.
Thank you for the work. We'll definitely keep in touch, and we'll definitely do a part 2 on this, and this is going to be next week, but the week after. Thank you so much, my brother, Russ Michael, Gillie Priest, Heron. What you have to read the book. What a book. What an experience. Please read the book.